Today we're taking a look at Edgar Allan Poe and his nightmarish mind in the Cask of Amontillado. So let's start by looking at the writing style of Poe. So he wrote in what's known as the Gothic style. What does that mean? Well, usually there's a sense of deep emotions. There's a lot of intensity from the context itself. He's going to use a myriad of descriptions, a lot of adjectives and phrases that are going to explore the worlds of dreams and more specifically a nightmare. Now, in his stories, the past is usually darker. Usually you'll have the sense of a stormy night, or you'll have a sense of going down into some caverns or tombs. You're also going to feel more ominous and more oppressive towards the heroes and heroines. They're going to have this sense of pressure, this sense of tension, this sense of stress as they are being ominously oppressed. So what do we have about Poe's characters? Well, many of his characters are usually filled with that sense of madness, the sense or spark of insanity or craziness. You don't get it immediately at the beginning, but as you continue reading through their characterization, you can see with what is either happening to them at the time or what they're revealing to the reader or the viewer is the sense of madness growing, or that sense of insanity, that sense of craziness is growing as you get towards the end of the story. Poe is also obsessed with the irrational side of the mind, where you have this fight or flight kind of tendency, where you don't sit down and logically figure out what is supposed to be happening. And so a lot of times you can't tell the reality from the unreality because the characters don't give you that information. So let's take a look at the Cask of Amontillado. Well, with the background of the Cask of Amontillado, it was published in 1846. It's one of the later stories that Edgar Allan Poe publishes. One theory for the inspiration for the story was a feud that Poe was actually having with two other poets at the time. Apparently, he had other poets who were publishing in their own editorials that Poe was a bit of a hack, that he was actually even stealing some ideas from others. And so he had a bit of a feud and was kind of fighting them in his own editorials and papers. And so a lot of people believe maybe perhaps the Cask of the Amontillado, this particular story, is his way of kind of expressing what he would want to do if he was able. Now, the story was somewhat controversial for focusing his story on a crime with no apparent motive. We don't know specifically why Fortunato and Montresor are having this fight. And we also have a murderer at the end with no apparent remorse. You have this murderer actually seeming kind of glad, almost gleeful, that he has done what he's done at the end of the story. So a little bit of the overview of the Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Well, the story is narrated by a gentleman by the name of Montresor. It is in a first-person point of view, so it's going to take a little while before you get to his name. And he carries a grudge against the other main character, Fortunato. His offense? It's never explained, but apparently it's enough to drive Montresor to the ideal of murder. So Montresor is going to lead a drunken Fortunato through a series of chambers beneath his palazzo. Both are quite wealthy men. Montresor says that he has a cask of Amontillado that he'd like Fortunato to try, just to make sure that it is good Amontillado. It might not be. And so he asks Fortunato to come to his house, and he's going to lead him through a series of chambers beneath the palazzo. Although Fortunato has a cough, the promise of a taste of this Amontillado wine spurs him deeper and deeper into the underground. We hear Montresor attempting to stop Fortunato from coming deeper and deeper. He says, "You have a terrible cough, maybe we should go back upstairs." But Fortunato is very insistent because he wants to taste this Amontillado wine. Now, when the two men reach the last underground chamber, Montresor chains Fortunato to the wall. Again, we don't know what the motive is, but we know he feels he has been so wronged that he feels that this is his revenge for Fortunato. So he's going to chain Fortunato to the wall, and then he builds a new wall in front of him to seal Fortunato in. And then he's going to leave Fortunato chained and behind that wall, and he leaves him to die. So what are we looking for with the sense of the literary focus? What are the themes and what are the conflicts that are going on? Well, obviously the first one is revenge. Fortunato is apparently done something wrong, and our main character Montresor is looking for revenge. Again, we don't know what the wrong has been done, but Montresor, your main character, wants a sense of revenge. There also is a sense of madness here where we don't have any logical reason for that revenge. We don't see any remorse at the end of what he has done to Fortunato, so there is this sense of irrationality going on. There's also this sense of deception. Again, we do know from the start that Montresor feels like he's been wronged and he's looking for vengeance, he's looking for revenge, and so he's going to trick Fortunato into coming into the basement. So then when we get to the very end, there is this controversial ideal of remorse versus lack of remorse. There will be some theorists who say there is a sense of remorse when he gets to the very end. He almost has bricked up Fortunato completely into the wall, but when Fortunato goes silent, Montresor actually picks up his light in order to try and see if the gentleman is still back there. There might almost be a sense of remorse, but since he obviously fills up the entire wall, leaves him down there to die, most theorists would say there is certainly a lack of remorse. Is there a sense of pride? Well, these are two wealthy gentlemen. We're not sure what wrong has been committed. There certainly is a sense of pride in Fortunato because he wants to be the one to taste this Amontillado. He finds it prideful that Montresor has asked him to be the expert, and so there probably is a bit or a sense of pride in this particular story. The sense of friendship comes along as well. Fortunato to the last believes that he and your main character Montresor are friends, that he's going over to his friend's home in order to share this bottle of wine, that his friend trusts his expertise. He gladly follows Montresor down into the catacombs in the caverns beneath his house. There's a sense of friendship here. The sense of power and respect as well, where we have Montresor, because of his wealth, because of his knowledge of Amontillado, because of his knowledge as a mason, is able to lead Fortunato into his basement, lead him to the darkest depths where nobody's going to find him, and then be able to quickly chain and wall up this person so he can get his revenge. That's power. Lastly, the sense of social classes and social significance within society. We wouldn't be seeing two gentlemen of this stature if they weren't wealthy. We would not have this kind of a story. You're going to have in different wealth classes different stories of murder and mayhem and revenge. Everybody has those. But because of the social significance of these people, we see Montresor having to make great plans. He needs to make sure that his servants believe they don't have to be in the house. He needs to get his servants out of the house. We have an area in the basement far away from anybody to be able to hear Fortunato's screams or understand that there's somebody in the basement. That's a pretty large place. And then, of course, the Amontillado sherry itself. The idea that you would have two men who want to discuss the ins and outs of a particular wine to the point of pride, to the point where one believes he's an expert and he's going to go anywhere he can in order to taste this particular type of wine. There are a few symbols and a little bit of irony going on in this particular story. For example, with the idea of symbols, Montresor's coat of arms and motto. And his motto is Latin, Nemo me impune lacet. And his coat of arms, where we happen to have a foot stamping down on a snake. But at the same time, the snake is coming around and biting the foot. And we have a picture of it in the lower left-hand side, where you are crushing the head of the snake. You are killing the snake. But the poisonous snake is also now biting the foot. So you are taking each other out. The irony that we have also is the usage of a trowel. We talk about how there's this sense of masons. And so when we think of the idea of masons, usually they are wealthy gentlemen who do social services in the town. But you also have masonry and the idea of a mason who knows how to put bricks and mortar together in order to create things such as walls. So the irony or the usage of a trowel here that we've been carrying all this time in Montresor's hand where Fortunato found that kind of confusing, we actually do see that Montresor is going to use the trowel for what it is. So then we have the literary focus with our point of view. It is told in the first person by Montresor. We actually don't get his name until Fortunato gives it to us. Now, by presenting the story in the first person, Poe puts the reader at the mercy of an unreliable narrator. We don't know who this guy is until we get his name from somebody else. He's also quite unreliable because we don't have the full story. We don't understand what Fortunato has done wrong and what terrible things that he has done in order to deserve being chained up and walled away. And so we kind of look at Montresor as a madman, a crazy person who decides what to tell you and what parts of the story to leave out. So let's take a look at the character of Fortunato. Well, he's apparently Montresor's sworn enemy and is not exactly sure that he is. Matter of fact, there's a sense of friendship. He's going down into the catacombs in order to help his friend Montresor make sure that he didn't waste his money, that he actually spent some good money on an Amontillado wine. Now, Fortunato displays no uneasiness in Montresor's company. He's unaware that his friend is plotting against him. He does have that sense of pride that he is a proud connoisseur of fine wine, and he's urged on by this chance of sampling some rare Amontillado. He is sick, he has coughs, he's drunk, and so therefore wandering down in the dark on some damp stairs is probably not a good idea. So this sense of pride, this sense of friendship is what's driving him on. He has no idea that he is a sworn enemy. Now, a person who is spoken about but is not actually in the story is a man by the name of Luchesi. Now, he's apparently an acquaintance of both of these men, of Montresor's and Fortunato's. He's apparently also a good wine expert, to the point where Fortunato believes that he's kind of a rival. With his sense of pride, he believes he's better than Luchesi. And so Montresor keeps Fortunato on the trail of Amontillado by threatening to allow Luchesi to sample it beforehand. So if we start having these coughs, or because he's drunk, Fortunato kind of slows down on the trail on his way down to the catacombs, we keep Fortunato on this trail by saying, well, why don't I go get Luchesi? Luchesi can taste the Amontillado for me. You don't have to do this. That sense of pride that Fortunato has keeps him going, and Luchesi is just a pawn in all of this. And then, of course, our main character, Montresor. He seems to hold a grudge against his friend Fortunato. We don't know what unnamed offenses he has done to Montresor, but it obviously is enough to make him want to kill the man. Montresor is wealthy. He lives in a palazzo. He lives in a huge palace mansion type area in which he has catacombs and cellars and other things in the basement that are just absolutely miles and miles long. And then, of course, we are not only keeping our wine down there, but we keep the other Montresors down in the basement as well. So it's kind of creepy. It's kind of dark. Certainly very much what we see in Edgar Allan Poe's dark, scary prose style. He has planned the murder of Fortunato, and he's telling the story 50 years after it's taken place. He's had 50 years to wonder, maybe I shouldn't have chained and walled up a man in my basement. But at the end, he reveals that he feels no regret for his actions. So he's telling us the story 50 years on, and if we feel this sense of horror or this sense of remorse, he doesn't. We don't see any regret, not in his actions and not in his retelling of the story. All right, guys, thanks so much for stopping by. If you want to check out my next video, which will be on the Mask of the Red Death, come on back to the channel. Otherwise, thanks for stopping by.